When a man intended to consecrate a field within his tribal allotment, the field would be elevated according to its production at a rate of 10 shekels per bushel, or 62.60 per bushel according to 2019's market. When a man intended to consecrate a field outside of his tribal allotment, the field would be evaluated according to however many years were left until the next year of Jubilee. After the year of Jubilee, it would revert back to the rightful owner or tribal family. However, if the one who consecrated the field was to vacate it during the year of Jubilee, it would perpetually belong to the priesthood. The first tenth from the herd of the flock was consecrated and was to be redeemed at 120% its value. If the owner was to exchange it, both the original animal and the exchanged animal were holy. Leviticus 27:16 through 34. Jeremiah's cousin Animal came and requested him to redeem his field at Anathoth. Now this would not have been advantageous as Anathoth had fallen to the Babylonians. This was the case for most of the kingdom of Judah, making it pointless to buy, sell, or redeem houses, fields, or vineyards. However, witnesses were called to witness the sale of the field for 109.55 in silver, and its verification, though the signing of 2 copies of the purchase contract and the sealing of the official copy purchase contract. Jeremiah then handed the purchase contract to Baruch the son of Neriah and instructed him to place the sealed and unsealed copies in a clay jar. After giving the purchase contract to Baruch, son of Neriah, I prayed to Adonai, Adonai Elohim, you made heaven and earth by your great power and outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you. You display your grace to thousands, but also repay the guilt of the fathers into the laps of their children who follow them. Great, powerful Elohim, whose name is Adonai Zevot, good in counsel, mighty indeed. Your eyes are open to all the ways of human beings in order to repay each one according to his way, according to the consequences of what he does. You gave signs and performed miracles in the land of Egypt, which continue to this day, also in Israel and among other people. Thus you made yourself the reputation you have today. You brought your people Israel out of the land of Egypt with signs and miracles, with a strong hand and outstretched arm, with great terror. Then you gave them this land, which you have sworn to their ancestors that you would give them, a land flowing with milk and honey. They entered and took possession of it, but they did not pay attention to your voice, did not live according to your Torah, and did not a thing of all you ordered them to do. Therefore you have made this complete disaster befall them. The siege works are already there. They have come to the city to capture it, and the city, by means of sword, famine, and plague, is being handed over to the Chaldean, fighting against it. What you foretold is being fulfilled. Here you see it yourself. Yet you, Adonai Elohim, have said to me, buy the field for money and call witnesses, even as the city is being turned over to the Chaldean. Then this word of Adonai came to Jeremiah. Look, I am Adonai, Elohim of every living creature. Is there anything too hard for me? Jeremiah 32:6 through 27. Quoting from his memoir, St. John the Beloved states that the one from the beginning became incarnate, and he, among others, experienced his incarnate presence. The apostle states that they are witnesses to the eternal life which came from the Father through the Son, making it possible that man could have fellowship with both the Father, who is light and there is no darkness in him, and the Son. Walking in truth and fellowship with the Father, the Son calls for the Messianic Jew and Christian to walk in light. Through this and the all-cleansing blood of Christ, they have fellowship with each other. However, the church must remember that they are not immune from the temptation of sin or from accidentally sinning as they live in a broken world. Rather, if they acknowledge their sin, He will forgive and purify them. A trademark of the Christian walk with and in communion with Him is that he follows the commandments of Matthew 22:36 through 40. Within this commandment of love, there is a reality of the darkness of sin vanishing as the light of Christ grows across humanity. Within having communion with Him, the Christian should conduct his life in a manner reflecting such, especially rejecting hate for his brother. Hating one's brother is inconducive to walking in the light, as the darkness has blinded his eyes. Expounding all of this, the one who loves the world cannot love the Father, as the source of his whole being was the carnality of the world. Those who reject the carnality and adhere to what Romans 8:13 states, love the Father and will remain after this world ceases to exist. It is ironic that St. John should say this, given what he would see in 2 years while on Patmos. From the time that he wrote this, it would be 2 years until he was on Patmos. St. John, according to Adam Clarke, addressed the 3 levels of true Christians. In instructing the convert, the apostle said their sins have been forgiven for Christ's sake and that they know the Father. The long faithful Christian is commended as having known Him who has existed from the beginning. All those who continue intentionally sinning do not know nor have communion with the Father and the Son. Though they are not bound by the legalistic understanding of Torah, the church is still held to understanding that the sins outlined in Torah are still sins under the new covenant. Now, to the growing Christian, St. John states that they have overcome the evil one as they are strong in their faith. In the Greek, the phrase Christoi poloi gegonasin hatin to oskimen hot escoti hora estim appears. As there were many antichrists appearing at the time of writing in the form of heretics, St. John told the devout that the church is in the last season of time. Note, many translations will call this the last hour, though the Greek gives the general sense of time instead of the finite definition of an hour. These heretics, if they had adhered to Christian orthodoxy, would have remained with the presbytery. Furthermore, it is the heretic who rejects Christ and the Father. St. John encourages orthodoxy in the church so that those who do such will remain in communion with the Father and the Son. In turn, those who do such will have eternal life as promised. St. John, according to Adam Clarke, addressed the 3 levels of true Christians. In instructing the convert, the apostle said their sins have been forgiven for Christ's sake and that they know the Father. The long faithful Christian is commended as having known Him who has existed from the beginning. All those who continue intentionally sinning do not know nor have communion with the Father and the Son. Though they are not bound by the legalistic understanding of Torah, the church is still held to understanding that the sins outlined in Torah are still sins under the New Covenant. Now, to the growing Christian, St. John states that they have overcome the evil one as they are strong in their faith. In the Greek, the phrase Christoi poloi gegonasin hatin te oskimen hot escorti hora estim appears. As all believers are in children of the Christ, or are children of the King, though they do not know fully what glorification will be like, the church will be similar to Christ in his glorification. His children must purify themselves, for the King is pure. Bishop Augustine of Hippo, in his fourth homily of of 1 John, suggests how this is to be done in accordance with the truth of the gospel. Not by yourself, but by him who comes to inhabit you, still because you do somewhat therein by the will, therefore is somewhat attributed to you. They are not to allow anyone to deceive them, as such are allied with the devil, who has been the enemy of righteousness from the beginning. Rather, they are to preserve in righteousness and Christian love. To emphasize this, St. John references the righteousness of Abel and the unrighteousness of Cain. Abel's love and righteousness came from the fact that the king was in Abel, whereas the enemy was within Cain, who hated his brother and killed him. This should also be understood as in support of Christ's words in John 15:18, that the world, which is ruled by the enemy, will hate the Christian and Messianic Jew. Moreover, Christian love came from the sacrificial death of Christ, who willingly died for humanity. As such, the Christians should be willing to lay down their freedoms and views for the sake of another's faith. This principle is explained by St. Paul in 1 Corinthians 9:18 through 22, where Paul instructed Christians to love one another by refraining from allowing one's personal views and freedoms from hindering those of another. Note, one Christian may be led to eat in accordance with the dietary laws of Moses, and another Christian finds it perfectly fine to eat anything that breathes. Both are to respect the other's views out of Christian love. Also, Christian love even covers the needs of believers in actions and reality. Per Jameson, Fawcett, and Brown, if the Christian fulfills this love in actions and reality, they really are followers of Christ, who is freed from condemnation, and his doubts and fears are calmed. However, just as Peter was haunted by his consciousness and was reassured in John 21:15 through 19, the Christian who is assaulted by his consciousness will be reassured by his Christian love for his brother. Conversely, if the Christian examines himself and finds nothing in his consciousness, he can confidently request what he needs from the Father, who in turn will give such to the Christian who is obeying the commandments. Note, this is on the grounds that the request is in collaboration with his will. Though no one has seen the Father, humanity has seen him through his Son, sending his Son to be the atonement for all sins once and for all. Just as the Father loves his Son, a father must love his children and fellow Christians. By having the King as its Father, the Church has overcome the world by the witness of the blood, water, and the Spirit. Note, the Spirit is understood, but the water and blood are debated. Bishop Augustine of Hippo suggested that this was a reference to John 19:34, whereas Luther believed it was an implication of the sacraments of the Eucharist and baptism. Yet, Tertullian suggested that it was more probable to mean the water of Christ's baptism and the blood of Christ's crucifixion. Besides these, the King has granted the Church eternal life through his Son. This life is given to anyone who trusts in the humanity and divinity of Christ. Christian love unites the church and brings them into maturity. However, maturity comes with discernment, especially in spiritual matters. St. John instructed the church to test any and all spiritual experiences to assess if the experience is from the Father or the devil. This is necessary as many false prophets and heretics are among the populace of the earth. Note, the earth in this sense is the world known to the Romans prior to the 2nd century. Every spirit which acknowledges that Jesus Christ came from the Father, such spirits are spoken by the church as they know the Father and have overcome the world. Any spirit that says the opposite is the spirit of the Antichrist and false prophets, which the church has overcome. Christ's Spirit unites the church with Him and is proof that the King loves and is with them. This Christian love lacks fear and condemnation by the King, making the church confident of its position on the day of judgment. Even though there might not be condemnation from above, the Christian has a duty to correct a wayward brother. However, the wording of 1 John 5:16 is confusing. If anyone sees his brother committing a sin that does not lead to death, he will ask, and Adonai will give him life for those whose sinning does not lead to death. There is a sin that does lead to death. I am not saying he should pray about that. According to Adam Clark, a sin which leads to death is a reference to the 28 violations in Torah warranting the death penalty. Note, these same kinds of sins would later be known as mortal sins. Conversely, a sin not leading to death were the laws which were punished by corporal punishment or fines. Note, these kinds of sins would later be known as venial sins. According to Jameson, Fawcett, and Brown, the Christian who sees a fellow Christian faltering should offer an intercessory prayer on behalf of the wayward Christian who is committing a venial sin. Regardless, though, sin is still sin, and the church has the power to overcome the sins of the world through its divinely ordained discernment, obtained by being in union with the Father and Son. Such discernment is even needed when dealing with false idols. Note, 1 John 5:21 referred to the idols which were prevalent in St. John's lifetime. However, if we apply this warning to the 21st century church, the Christian needs to be aware of false idols which are not as obvious as a statue. 1 John chapter 1 through chapter 5.